Welcome to another episode of Ask the Zamboni Expert. I'm your host, Doug Peters, and today with me I have Tom Reid, former NHL player, current Minnesota Wild radio analyst, and owner of Tom Reid's Hockey City Pub. Welcome today, Tom. How you doing?
I am doing well.
That's good. That's good. Hey, I've got a few questions for you. I hope you don't mind. Where did you grow up, and what was your first experience with an ice resurfacer?
You know, I grew up in Fort Erie, Ontario, which is a border town right across from Buffalo, New York. And we used to engage quite a bit of the Americans coming over to the Canadian side, and we'd go to the American side and play games and so on. But I'll tell you, Doug, when I started as a rink rat at 11 years of age in Fort Erie, but we didn't have machinery. We had scrapers and we had barrels with a cloth put on the back end of it to flood the ice. And we could actually scrape the ice during hockey games, senior hockey games, and we could actually do it in about 7 minutes. There's about 4 or 5 of us, and we get out there and we have 2 barrels going and a number of guys on these scrapers, and we could do that. And then eventually, it was back in the probably the early 60s to mid 60s that we got what they called, it was a Schaumburg machine. And it fit on the back. It wasn't a Zamboni, unfortunately. We didn't have the money for something like that in our town, but it would fit on the back of our tractor, which had a front end loader. So when we went around the boards, we had to make sure the front end loader was lifted up high enough so we wouldn't hit the fencing, because we didn't have glass either. We had frost fencing. And so we were pretty excited about doing that. The biggest day of the year, I think, was when we took the ice out, because we would scrape the ice and we'd open a door that was along the boards and throw the snow that we've accumulated into this pit. And the reason it was a big day is because when we melted all that snow and took the water out, there was money in the bottom of the pit from people throwing coins onto the ice. It was pretty good. We'd get a few dollars and we'd spend it together. We'd divide it all up, but it was kind of funny. But we didn't have the Zamboni machines in those days. I can remember watching the Toronto Maple Leafs on TV as a kid growing up, and they didn't have the Zamboni. They had the guys who actually had the barrels and they had the scrapers, and that's how we did it.
That's probably the last time the Maple Leafs have won a Stanley Cup.
Well, it was '67.
Cool.
I think they had them. I think they.
It goes back a few years with them, and that's just a jab to our Canadian plant. We've got several Maple Leaf fans up there. Tom, have you ever driven a Zamboni machine?
No, I have not. I've been on them, but I have never driven one. In fact, I've been in some parades where they have them here in St. Paul, but I've never driven one. So it's kind of fun. Of course, all the cities now, they have a guest, usually a young kid in many cases, that sits on the Zamboni and goes around. Has to be quite a thrill for them.
Cool. Yeah, maybe what we'll have to do is get you on a machine someday and see how you perform on that side of the ice.
Good luck on that one.
Tom, I've known you for many years. I've been blessed with that. It goes back to the days of my dad working for the North Stars. You weren't one of the originals. I've done a little bit of digging to learn a little bit about how you ended up with the North Stars. You would think I would have known that, but I didn't. I didn't realize that you're part of a trade with Andre Boudria going to the Blackhawks. What was the highlight of your NHL career as you saw it? And then I'll share with you what I remember as a kid growing up watching you play at the Met.
You know, just getting to the National Hockey League was a thrill. And I remember breaking with Chicago back in '67, and all of a sudden I'm playing with Mikita and Hull and Nestorenko and Pierre Palat, and the list goes on. And a lot of these names people would not remember, but these were all-star players or Hall of Fame players. And to be a part of that, and then, you know, I signed on as a junior with the Chicago organization in St. Catharines, which is about 35 miles from my hometown. And we billeted up with a couple other players in a home there, and we would be their junior farm team. And for $100, they had my NHL rights. They gave me a check that was called a C form. And to be able to sign that, and I was not a very good player growing up. I mean, I remember as a kid growing when I got to be 12 and 13, and all my buddies made the All-Star team, and I never made it. I was pretty gangly at that point, so I was very uncoordinated. And to just to be on the ice was fine with me. I didn't care about playing the All-Star game or playing on these teams that travel. Just to get on the ice and play, and that's why I became a rink rat when I was young. But I think when I go to the NHL, I think one of the highlights of my career was when we were playing against Montreal in the second round, the semifinals, and we were the first NHL expansion team of '67 to win any of the games against an old established club. Now, St. Louis had gone, and when they did the expansion draft in '67, they took a lot of veteran players, and most of the other teams in expansion did not do that, and that's why St. Louis was so good in those early days. I mean, they just had a lot of experience on the blue line and in the net. They had Jacques Plante was in the net. They had Glenn Hall, so they had some pretty high-powered guys, and they did a great job. But we wound up playing against Montreal. We got beat out in 6 games in that series, and we actually scored a goal. Ted Hampson scored a goal, but Bill Friday waved it off, saying that the puck was not over the line before the final buzzer went. And so we wound up losing that series in 6 games. And I think that as a team, that was probably the most fun I think we've ever had, and that was back in 1971.
Yeah, I remember that. I had a book that I think my dad provided to me about Bill Goldsworthy, and there was pictures of the face-off and then the dejection in the fans' faces when the goal was waved off because it was a split second too late.
They didn't have replays or things like that. And I can tell you, because I was in a position, I was on the ice at the time. I had started to play from behind our own net to Parisi and over to Hampson. Hampson shot and scored. But I was in a position where I could see the puck over the line before the light changed. And but unfortunately, the referee, Bill Friday, was not in that position. He didn't have the tools they have nowadays to decide whether it's a good goal or a bad goal. So he waved it off. And would we have won the game? I don't know. But it certainly made it interesting. And Glenn Somore, the old coach in the National Hockey League, especially with Minnesota, always said you want to lose in the final game and you want to lose in overtime or a questionable call, because that'll bring the fans back the following year.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you talk about Montreal, because as a kid, my favorite moment, I think, with you, and it's on your Wikipedia sheet, is scoring on a penalty shot against probably the greatest goaltender of that era, Kenny Dryden. And maybe you can fill us in, because there's a lot of discussion about that you went to the bench saying you didn't want to take the shot. And you were quite the goal scorer, if I recall correctly. So I don't know why you wouldn't want to take that shot.
Yeah, you got that right, Doug. The thing is also, I was actually in the penalty box. And they gave me a penalty, which I probably didn't deserve anyway. But they sent me to the sin bin, and it was one of those situations where I came out of the penalty box, and the guys went to clear the puck down the ice, and they shot it right towards where I was skating into, and it hit my skate. So I just followed the path of the puck, which was going to the opposite end. As I got over the blue line, I was getting set, and Guy Lapointe, who's still a scout for the Wild here, and a good friend of mine over the years that we've become acquainted, tripped me, and I slid into the boards, and to the left of Ken Dryden, and I'm sitting on the ice with my back against the boards, and Bruce Hood, the referee, came over, and he said, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay, but they got a penalty, right?" He says, "No, you have a penalty shot," and I said, words to the effect, "The hell with that, Bruce. I don't want a penalty shot. Just we'll take the yard, take the 2 minutes, we'll take whatever. But don't give. I am not a goal scorer. My game was defense, not offense." And so I got up and went back to the bench. And Jack Gordon was our coach. And in those days, all the coaches wore, the hats, the fedoras. And so he's looking at me. He said, "What's going on?" I said, "I have no idea." I said, I think we have a power play. So Bruce came over and said, "Come on, Jack, let's go." And he said, "Well, what?" And he said, "Tom's got a penalty shot." And Jack looked at him and looked at me and looked back at Bruce, and I can still see the look on his face. And he says, "Does he have to take it?" "Bruce, I think I broke my leg." He said, "Get your ass out here." He said, you're going to have to delay a game penalty." So now I get ready, and I'm thinking, oh, Ken Dryden, and it's October. And as good as the ice was at the Met Center, it was one of those days where it was warm, so the ice was a little bit sticky. The pucks weren't as frozen as they are in today's game. The ice was not as good as in today's game in many cases. But, I thought, I'm just thinking, if I can just get over the blue line, I'll be happy. without losing the puck. And JP and Goldie says, go here, go there. And JP says, just put the puck behind him. And so, here thing, the building was full. It was 1-0 Montreal. It was in the third period. And so I thought, well, here I go. So I went in, and I got about the top of the hash marks, and Ken was moving a little bit. And I thought, I'm just going to shoot and see what happens here. And so I took a shot, and he went to the left. It went between his legs into the net. Of course, the crowd, and I could not hear a sound in the whole building. And so I scored the goal, and I go back to the bench, and all the guys are congratulating me. And I'm looking at Jack Gordon. I looked at Jack, and I said, Jack, was there ever any doubt in your mind? He just laughed. We wound up because there was no overtime in those games. It wound up to be a 1-1 game in Minnesota.
Oh, that's awesome. How has hockey changed from when you played to where it is today? And do you think that the players enjoy the game as much as you guys did in your era?
I don't think they enjoy it as much. I mean, they're paid handsomely for what they do, and they earn it. Let me tell you, I watch these guys because I travel with the team doing the radio broadcast, and these guys work really hard. I mean, it's not just a go to the rink, you do a practice, and you're gone. I mean, they're in the weight room, they're doing all kinds of things. I mean, they're training techniques, they've got these computer generated, wires all over them, and figuring out who's working hard and who's not working hard, and they can tell all these things. The game has really changed. I mean, it's become the expansion, Doug, if you remember, the expansion back in '67 was $2 million to get in the National Hockey League, and that's when the 6 teams came into the league. And of course, you're talking Minnesota and St. Louis and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Oakland and LA. Those 6 teams each paid $2 million. Now with Seattle coming in, I mean, just a couple more years, you're going to see them paying $650 million just for the rights to have a team. So you can see how it's changed there. But the training techniques and what they have, I mean, I go in these weight rooms and the equipment they have, I mean, they're huge. And of course, Doug, and you would remember the Met Center too. I mean, our training room consisted of a pool table. We had a color TV. We had a pop machine. We had 4 tables, 16 chairs, and about 22 ashtrays. And one of those machines put the belt around your waist and it jiggles you. That's what we had. We didn't have any of that today.
I remember those days fondly, and I remember as a kid, and I was probably less than 10, being around hockey stars, my favorite team, the North Stars. And I can distinctly remember you in a long fur coat of the day and some what did they call the platform shoes and the bell bottom pants, and that's kind of etched in my mind. So different times, and I can recall had a lunch with Luc Robitaille a while back, and he talked about when Sidney Crosby signed his contract and what it was like when Luc was young and what it was like when you were playing, how much different it would be, in that Sidney had a glass of wine to celebrate, whereas back in the day, you guys might have had a beer or two in between periods of a hockey game. I've heard rumors of that being possible.
I never saw that. And all the years I played 700 games, never saw beer in the dressing room that we had, ever. Never?
Not even post game?
Not even post game. Not when I played.
Wow.
They had it teams later on, but we never, in my era anyway, we never had, but we had lots of beer after the game, and we went to different establishments in different cities. We would do that, but I never saw any beer in the locker room during our day, and you wouldn't see that today either.
No,
not for the play.
Yeah, no, I can't even imagine. And just the size of the locker rooms are so much different, and what they have available. And if somebody gets injured in a game, it's just a different animal nowadays.
Well, yeah, and you look at some of the tragedies that have occurred over the years, and guys who got seriously injured. We had some injuries. We didn't have face masks. We didn't have mouth guards. We didn't have shield. We had nothing like that. And so there was a little more respect, I think, in how you handled your stick and if you wanted to hurt somebody, you certainly could with a stick. But nowadays, it's the velocity of the pucks, the equipment, the manufacturing of the sticks that are all custom made to exactly what the player wants. We didn't have that. We had a piece of wood, and sometimes it was too whippy, you couldn't use it, and so we would, maybe find 2 or 3 out of a dozen that were suitable for a game. And I remember going to, and Doug, I remember being with Minnesota, we went to Pittsburgh to play one time, and there was an air traffic controller strike. And Stan Whalen, who was one of our guys there, forgot to pack our sticks. So we got there, we had sticks. So we had to borrow the sticks from the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they were giving us all their old stuff. We didn't get any new stuff from them. And guys, it'd be a right-handed shot, and all of a sudden the curve's going the other way, but the shaft was good. We would heat them up and then bend the blade underneath the door frame, trying to get it to the wanted. I mean, that's what we did. And even in the early 70s, when Frankie Berry was the chief official in the National Hockey League, in charge of all the referees, he would come in and he would check the curvature of the stick and make sure, and then he would stamp it with the big green stamp approved by the National Hockey League for playoff competition. And as soon as he left, we'd just heat him up again and bend him a little bit.
Well,
we got caught, but we never got caught.
That's interesting. It leads into a story at Tom Reid's Hockey City Pub. I visited there on a couple occasions and always look forward to it when I have time when I'm in the cities to stop in hopes that I'll catch you there. There is a letter that I remember seeing framed and hung on a wall there. It talked about what would happen to the North Star players if they were caught intentionally breaking one of their sticks, because they cost about $2.50 at the time. And was that from one of the, I think it was the general manager, was it either Jack Gordon or Ren Blair, or did that come from Walter Bush, the owner?
Yeah, I think, Walter was the president, one of the owners here, but I think that letter actually came from Ren Blair, and it was a $10 fine if you were caught breaking a stick intentionally or giving it away. So we had to make sure that we do that. I mean, it was a little bit tighter dollars-wise in those days than it is today.
Yeah, it's amazing when you take a look back at now you've got kids playing the game and using $300 sticks. I've got nephews whose kids are out there playing. I'm just looking, going, how can you afford to have a $300 stick? So.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, but we were very careful. Even when I was playing junior back in my hometown, Junior B, we didn't have money to buy brand new sticks. We would take little tacks, and we'd actually put the tack through to hold the stick together. You couldn't take a slap tack; it was going to break. So we were very careful. It's interesting too, Doug, is that when I came up, my third year of junior eligibility, I was with the Blackhawk organization, and I made the first All-Star team in the OHA, which is now the OHL. And my signing bonus with Chicago in those days was $500 with a $10,000 pay period for the year. And I remember going out and open with Stan Mikita, and a couple of days later he said, "Well, how'd you do in your contract?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Tommy Ivan, Mr. Ivan didn't want us to say anything because," and he said, Stan said, "Well, tell us because it helps us in our negotiations." So I told him what I got, and he says, $10,000. I said, "Yeah." He said, "You happy with that?" I said, "Of course I'm happy with that. $10,000, some little kid from Fort Erie, Ontario, in the National Hockey League." He said, "That's the minimum." But we didn't have agents in those days, so how do we know that? But it was, in all the years I played, 11 years in the NHL, I was very fortunate to play with and against some of the greatest players of the game today. And it was never about money. It was never about money and what you're going to make. It's just the fact that you get a chance to play in the National Hockey League.
That's awesome. Do you still stay in contact with any of the players, the old North Star players or staff that are still around? Guys like Caesar, Lou Nanny, Dennis Hextall, maybe Al Shaver, who was my idol when I was growing up?
Yeah, I talk to Al about once a month. I give him a call. He's living on Vancouver Island in a place called Qualicum Beach. And he just moved into a senior high-rise out there. He loves it out there. His wife passed away. Shirley passed away a little over a year ago. And he was a wonderful guy. He's 94 years old.
Wow.
He sounds good. follows the game. He watches. I mean, he said he's lost without having any hockey on TV right now. So it's really difficult. But of course, as you know, also Doug, in our building here at the XL Energy Center, which to me is still one of the best hockey arenas in the country, even though it's 20 years old. It's a beautiful facility. It's the Al Shaver press box, and so his name is up there. And I've got pictures of Al here in my club. I've got over 500 items of memorabilia that hang on my walls, the door of my walls, and the ceiling and everything else. So it's pretty fun. But I do associate with I see Louis quite a bit. We talk. I haven't heard from Dennis Hextall, but Barry Gibby and I were roommates for a number of years with the North Stars, so I keep in touch with him. I see Caesar once in a while, but there's quite a few players who have made their home here also in the Twin City area or in Minnesota that we get together as an alumni group.
That's great. It's funny, I was out visiting a rink in Grand Junction, Colorado, which is owned by the nephew of Richard Zamboni, who's the president of our company. And I walked into the lobby, and there's a picture of Dennis Hextall in a Red Wings uniform, and he had just been out there doing a hockey camp. Now, this was a couple of years ago, but it was funny. It brought back a lot of memories. Some fisticuffs between him and Keith Magnuson and Dave Schultz of the Broad Street Bullies way back in the day.
Yeah, there's some great battles on the ice, and of course, when you don't have the helmets and you know the crowd, really the frenzy of the crowd, and the glass, if you remember too, was along the boards was very short, so the people could actually stand up and holler and scream at you, and certainly that. And of course, Dennis Hextall, he was great with a stick. He loved to jab the guys with a stick, and so there's a lot of situations where those bench clearing brawls would take place, and they were fun. You know, you don't want to get beat up, but they were still fun to be a part of.
My father used to get taken advantage of, I think, with some practical jokes by some of the players. J.P. Parisi, whose son Zach is now a member of the Minnesota Wild. Did you ever get caught up in the hijinks, either my father taking advantage of you or J.P. and the other guys looking after you as well?
He certainly did a few times during the course of the time your dad was here, and he was a great guy. He loved the game, he loved being around the players, and he was always a fun guy to have him in the crowd. But he would take that powdered paint, the red line and the blue line, and he would put it in my gloves when I wasn't around. Of course, I go on the ice for practice or whatever, and of course you're perspiring now. That powder is mixing with the perspiration, and I take my gloves off, and my hands are blue and they're red. And
yeah, I remember fondly my dad telling me, and JP, who is I believe French Canadian, with his accent, was not very kind with a few of his words, and they did, I think, get my dad back when he had a wool pinstripe suit, and they baby powdered the suit, and I don't know if that was the start of it that got him going or whatnot, but he always loved to play a few jokes on the guys.
No, there were jokes all the time going on, believe me, and they were certainly not malicious, but they were funny. Doc Rose was our trainer for a number of years, and he was our equipment guy, and he became the medical guy there. But I remember one time he went down to a local clothing store, and he bought a green blazer, and he told the guy in there, "Do not sell any other player a green blazer like this. I don't want this to be it's not a team blazer, it's my own." The guy, "Oh, don't worry." Well, 4 days later, he had to get it altered. About 4 or 5 days later, Charlie Burns, who was our player, he became a coach of ours also. He when he was coaching, he went into the clothing store, and the guy said, "Oh, I just got Doc Rose's blazer back here." And Charlie said, "Well, I'll take it to the rink for him." No problem. Oh, the guy said, "That's great." So he gets there, and Charlie comes to me, and because he knew that I'd go along with it, and he said, he told me what happened, how he had Doc's green jacket. I said, "Oh, okay." So I'm in the training room getting treatment from Doc, and pretty soon here comes Charlie, walks in, he's wearing this green blazer. And I said, "Hey, Charlie, nice. Is that a new jacket?" He says, "Yeah, it's brand new." And he says, "First time I've ever had it on," which is all true. And Doc looked up. He turned the color of ketchup. He was so, and he's swearing. "And where'd you get that?" Doc said, Charlie said, "Well, I got it at the clothing store." And he said, and he was livid about the guy. He got so mad, and we just kept, riding him. Right? Well, you guys go out to dinner together. There's a lot of things you can do now. They both got the green jackets. And finally, he got so mad, he ran out and he got the powder bag, and he started hitting the green jacket, the dark green jacket, with his powder bag, turned it white. And then he goes and gets the cotton bat and he starts rubbing it. Now you got all this cotton bat all over it. So we're just laughing, and Doc thinks he's done a great thing. And Charlie goes out and comes back, and he had it in the bag with the name of the clothing store on there, and says, "By the way, this is your green jacket. I picked it up today."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Bloomington's changed dramatically since the days when the Met Center used to be there, which is now an IKEA store, and the Met Stadium, which is now the Mall of America. I refer to it as the Mall of Heck. But what was your favorite haunt on the Strip in the day, if you ever did decide to go out and have a barley pop?
Well, we did that just about every day. After practice, we would go up at Eddie Webster's. Eddie Webster's right there in the not far from the Met Center, right across the Cedar Avenue, and we would go there. It was a peanut bar, and we went there, relax, nobody would bother us, and we would sit there for hours on end sometimes, just getting ready for the next day's events. But that was probably our favorite hangout for all the players. We'd go bowling once in a while, in a bowling alley in Bloomington, but for the most part, we always met over at Eddie Webster's.
And that was near the Decathlon Club, where they used to give out the Hobie Baker Award, if I remember correctly, and one of the former Zamboni.
When they took down Eddie Webster's, isn't that where the Decathlon Club went? Yeah,
that could be. Could be. It's been a long time. I've been gone out of Minnesota for 33 years now, and it's hard for me to even recognize things when I go back there.
Well, I agree.
You own and operate Tom Reid's Hockey City Pub. Could you please tell us a bit about it and whether you serve that Wisconsin delicacy of cheese curds?
Of course, we have cheese curds. How could you not? But we also have we have a lot of poutine, which is one of our big sellers here too. It's a beef gravy with mozzarella melted cheese on top of French fries, and it's a very popular staple here in this building. But I've had this is my 21st year in business, and just go to tomreeds.com and you can see what our place is. We seat about 300 people. It's kind of a hangout. We're only two blocks from the XL Energy Center, where there's so many events and hockey games.
Well, I can vouch for it. I've been there. It's a great place. It's got a great vibe, great atmosphere, and people always have the opportunity to see you and talk to a North Star legend.
Yeah, I'm here I try and be here every day, and we get, even during the course of the season, we'll get a lot of the general managers and scouts and media people coming here prior to the game the next night. They'll come in for dinner, and we got 46 TVs in here, so we can put any event on TV that's showings for our customers coming in.
Great. You mentioned that you grew up in Fort Erie. And I was just wondering if you knew, because it's not a very large group of people from Fort Erie that have made it to the NHL. Do you know what Fort Erie player played in the most NHL games?
Is it Mike Lawler?
No. You're number 2 on the list. Randy Burridge played in 706 games.
Yeah. I see Randy every once in a while. He's a scout, I believe, now for the Nashville Predators. He's after me. He's quite a bit younger than I am, so I didn't really know him growing up when I was there. I left Fort Erie in 1976 to move to Minnesota.
It was interesting for me to see that you had 701 in NHL games, regular season games, and he had 706, and he just had a slight lead on you for scoring goals, where he almost hit 200 and you almost hit 20, but you were the solid defense guy that.
Hold on. How many goals did you get in the NHL?
I'm still searching for that first one, and because of my size and age and weight, I don't think I'm going to quite cut it nowadays. But again, I'd trade just about everything I have in my life for the one goal that you scored against Ken Dryden. That was still that's etched in my memory as a dream come true.
That's the highlight of my career.
Favorite food, Tom, while you're on the road?
Solid or liquid?
Either or.
I like barley. I mean,
okay.
Actually, well, we many times we would go to like a Japanese steakhouse.
Okay.
And we wouldn't order one meal; we'd order two. I mean, we consumed a lot of food because of the activities that we had. And it's interesting too, Doug, because I can remember when Stan Whaler was our medical guy, and day before a game, even, okay, can I get an orange or something? Because you can't have an orange. They're for the games. That's all. Now these players in all the cities, they've got their practice rinks. They have chefs after practice. They get a selection of food what they want. They get on the aircraft and they got all this food. They cut the oranges up, and that's what we would have in between periods. That was it, and nothing after the game. There's never food. Now these guys, it's the NHL, what they call the no hungry league. Now these guys eat constantly after games, but they're burning all that the energy they expel nowadays. I mean, the speed of the game and the ability that these guys have and what they can do is so much greater than when we were growing. We just didn't have the mechanics. We didn't have the facilities they have nowadays. And it's great for it's fun to watch, and it's fun to watch, like playing with JP for so many years, and then watching Zach grow up and what he's brought to the table. JP was a totally different player than Zach. Zach is not a high-end scoring guy. He's a guy that is successful because he works so hard, and he's relentless. He does not let up, and that's where he is certainly the most effective within 3 feet of that blue paint area of the goaltender. JP was more of a corner guy along the boards and a little more physical.
Yeah, I used to have a sweatshirt that had his caricature, and it said Jeep, and I had that for I don't know how long. The thing had so many holes in it when my mom finally threw it away. But Jeep was known for being a corner guy, and I think he played with Goldie, Bill Goldsworthy, and fed him the puck, and Goldie was the prolific scorer, and Hextall maybe centering that line for a while.
Yeah, Druin was on that line also one time. And, a funny story with JP. I mean, JP and Murray Oliver and Lou Nanny and myself, we went to Vietnam in the early 70s on a USO tour. And JP was terrified of going over there. And of course, we flew in helicopters with no doors on and machine gunners shooting in the trees as we're flying. And I'm looking down, we're 5,000 feet in the air, and I'm going, oh boy, isn't this fun? We were there for quite a period of time. And JP was always fun to pull pranks on. And I can remember we had one game at the Bayshore Hotel, or we stayed at the Bayshore in Vancouver, playing Canucks out there, and they had electric blankets. So I told Goldie, who was his roommate, I said, I'm going to switch the controls. So when he come in, I turn them both up to high, and he turns his down. Yours will come down, but his will stay hot. And JP, I guess, during the course of the evening, was fanning the sheets. He couldn't get the heat down. He kept turning the dial down, but it wouldn't stop. And he didn't know until the next day what was going on.
That's awesome. This is a throw out to a friend of mine, Jim Brown, who's a goalie fanatic. With Gump Worsley, you got to play a little bit with him, and I've actually got some old footage that I got from Al Shaver's son, a video of Gump where he had to actually reach his arm up to get it onto the crossbar. What would be your favorite Gump Worsley story? Because I know he was afraid of flying.
Oh, terrible. I flew with him. One time there were 2 first-class seats, and Ren Blair came back and said, hey, I've got you guys sit up in front here. So I sat beside him, and he would have a hanky, and he sat on the window, and I sat in the aisle. And whenever we had a little bit of a motion in the air, or the puck was the plane was bouncing a little bit, he would just get terrified. By the end of the flight, every flight, that hand, he could squeeze it and the water would just pour out of it. He just hated flying. And what a great goaltender. I mean, he wasn't a big guy. There's a reason they call him Gump, and he was a terrific guy to be around, fun guy to be around. And but he, in my mind, certainly a Hall of Famer, and had some great careers, especially with Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, he was an interesting character. I can remember back in the days when the newspaper sports section was orange on Sundays, so that you could easily find it. And I think it was a Saturday game where he'd got hit in the head, and he was the last goalie to play without a mask. And they hauled him off, and he had a story about how if he put his thumb up, that his wife knew that he was okay. But what a great guy and a character.
Yeah, oh yeah. And whenever he went down, he always went down on his back with his arms extended and his legs extended. And he would tell his wife, if I move my left foot, I'm okay. If I move my right foot, I'm not okay. If I move either of my feet, I'm dead.
Tom, I could talk with you forever, and I know you know how long I can jabber on, but I do want to ask a last question or two for you. What led you to get into your broadcasting career with the Minnesota North Stars at the time and the Minnesota Wild now?
Well, when I went to Sabo in 1970, I became allergic to my hockey equipment. I couldn't wear it anymore, and we tried different things over 3 years. I had no skin from my neck to my waist, basically during the hockey season, and it was painful. And finally, the doctors, I was going to Marshfield, Wisconsin, to a Dr. William Shore over there. He said, we can't give any more steroids. We can't give any more cortisone. There's nothing we can, you're going to have to retire. Otherwise, you'll be dead by the time you're 40. And I said, well, that's a pretty good option. So I quit. And it was right when WCCO had the rights to the North Stars, and it was going over to KSTP, to Mr. Hubbard's station, Stan Hubbard. And Walter Bush, who was the guy who really brought hockey to Minnesota, NHL hockey to Minnesota, came to me and said, would you be interested in doing some color with Al Shaver on radio? And I had nothing else going. I didn't expect to lose my career because of what happened. And I wasn't making a lot of money. And I said, yeah, I'll give it a try. So I did that, and I worked with Al for a couple of years. And then he came back to me and said, would you consider doing television with Bob Kurtz, who I still do the games with today on radio? And I said, oh boy, because I couldn't talk in front of people when I was a kid growing up at school and so on. I was terrified. And I said, well, I'll give it a shot. And I gave it a shot. And I was back in 1978. I started on radio in 1980 on TV. And I've done, NCAA. I did Michigan State for a couple of years with Bob Kurtz. I've done the high school hockey tournaments here in Minnesota, which are huge. I've done the North Stars for a number of years. I did the Minnesota Gophers for a long time on TV with Frank Mazzocco. So I've done quite a bit over the years and still enjoy it. I still enjoy going to the games. A lot of downtime I'm not really big on, but once a game starts, it's always fun.
That's interesting that you mentioned Stanley Hubbard. I've had the pleasure of working with him recently. Stanley 3 is down in Albuquerque. He
Right.
owns the Reels channel, and he also bought an ice rink down there that is rather unique, in that you can lift the gates up between the two rinks and have a great big loop. And he just bought a new Zamboni machine from me. So it's been a treat to go back and revisit, because I went to hockey camps, the North Star hockey camps, 100 years ago when I was a kid, and he was partaking in those as well.
Well, you mentioned the Stanley Jr. being down in Albuquerque. When I first came to Minnesota back in 1969, in the trade that brought me here, we had a practice one time, and there's a gentleman sitting behind our bench at practice with a young boy. And there's some other kids in the group as well, and some of the guys are going off and they're giving their stick. So those days we didn't get fined for giving the stick away, but some of the guys gave their stick to some of the kids, and this little guy didn't have a stick. So I went up in the dressing room and I got a stick and I brought it back down and I gave it to him. I had no idea it was Mr. Hubbard's son, who is Stan, who you talked about just a few moments ago, and gave him the stick. And Mr. Hubbard has never forgotten that. Even today, if he sees me, he'll mention that. And they're a great family here in Minnesota, and they really have supported so many different organizations here, not just in sports, but in all organizations. A great family.
I'm blessed to have met them. And when I was down in Albuquerque in October for the first junior game for the New Mexico Wolves, Stanley too was there, and I got to meet him and his wife, and they had brought John Masich down, who we're hoping to get on a future podcast, who's a hockey legend out of Eveleth, Minnesota. And just as nice as can be. And it was interesting because it goes into stories about my dad servicing Walter Bush's boat and Mr. Hubbard's boat on the St. Croix. And again, I could talk forever about that stuff, but I've got one last question. Is there a funniest on-air bleeper, blooper, or blip that you could share with us?
Oh boy, I'm pretty careful when I'm on the air, especially in today's world. I don't think there's anything that really comes to mind that I screwed up on the air. I think for the most part, it's been pretty good. And Bob Kurtz and I went together for so long, so we're pretty comfortable in our own skin doing our stuff together. We seem to have a good rapport, and I think that people enjoy it. And what I like about the radio side of it too, Doug, is that we're very honest. If the team's not playing well, we'll just say, this is an off night for the guys. There's certain players not playing well. You never want to ridicule a player or the team, but you sometimes have to put in perspective that this is just an off night for them, or else he made a bad decision with a puck, and when maybe he should have done this or something a little bit different. But I think for the most part, I don't think there's anything that is memorable that would stand out in my mind.
Well, it's always fun for me with the technology that's available today and subscriptions to satellite radio. When I was driving to work, now my walk to or commute to work is a walk down a hallway while things are going on that they are today in the world. I would always search out the Wild, even though I'm a Ducks fan, and listen for you because it brought back memories of watching you play hockey. And good times that I had seeing you play and knowing my dad was around at the Met Center. So I want to thank you for your time today, Tom, and I'm hoping that we could do this again because I've got a lot more questions for you that we didn't get to, but I really appreciate this, you taking your time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Doug.
Please follow Zamboni Company on all social media platforms for more information. And if you have a question for an expert or an idea for a future episode, email your questions to info@zamboni.com. Visit zamboni.com/podcast for more episodes or search Ask the Zamboni Experts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. This is Doug Peters wishing you a nice day.